Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Hype. I'm your host, Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. And as always, I have a great conversation and a great guest for you today. Listen, the theme of Beyond the Hype is that we kind of live in a very overhyped world where everything is supposed to be historic. Every news item is supposed to be amazing. And as a journalist, I'm always like, well, is it really? Today, it is really. We are going to be talking about a truly iconic Black-owned business that is now experiencing a major resurgence and evolution into the next generation of building on an amazing legacy for Black entrepreneurship and Black business covered by Black Enterprise. Today, we're talking about Atlanta Life Insurance Company, the iconic Black-owned life insurance company that through an investment from Magic Johnson, through the integration of new forward-thinking leadership, has just announced a major resurgence into a new generation of an iconic company. And today we have one of the key leaders of that resurgence, who, as soon as I met him, I was like, we got to get him on the show. Ryan L. Smith, Executive Vice President of Atlanta Life. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Alfred. It's a pleasure to be here.
So listen, when I got the invite from Magic Johnson saying, come to Atlanta, big announcement, I'm in my office in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, we get, at journalism, we get these press releases every day. Yeah. But when I saw it was Atlanta Life Insurance, I was like, this one I need to pay attention to, because I got to tell you, and I think I said to you in conversations before this interview, I covered Atlanta Life Insurance during my first years at Black Enterprise. Now we're going back over 35 years ago. I know the company well. I was assigned to cover all the Black financial companies in those days for my first maybe 5 or 6 years at Black Enterprise. So I'm very familiar with the Atlanta Life legacy. And I want to point out, first of all, I think you guys did a great job at that reception in Atlanta.
Thank you, and thank you for making the trip too. So.
Yeah, you really laid out in a very meaningful way what this really meant, so that it wasn't just hype. This is a real important story for Black Enterprise and in general. But I just want you to know, to show that I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. You guys did the great thoughtfulness of distributing copies of the Atlanta Life Insurance Company story, Guardian of Black Economic Dignity. I want you to know I have the original hard copy of that book for when it first came out. Because
I don't even have that. So you
I'm
are
a
true to
student
this.
of
You
Black
are
business
true to
history.
this. That's the picture they show on Amazon. I have yet to been able to procure a copy.
Well, I'm just impressed because, again, it would be one thing for you to say, oh, we're building on this legacy. It's another thing to say, no, we want to honor this legacy so you understand the legacy we're building on. And I just hope everybody who got a copy of the book reads the book, because it's worth it. I'm telling you. And I'm looking forward to reading it again. As I was preparing for this interview, of course, I went back to the book. And to show you that it wasn't buried in a box somewhere, the books behind me are all these books about Black business history, because it's just a real thing for me. But listen, before we get deep into where Atlanta Life is going, and why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing what you're doing, talk to me about your journey. I mean, you're really kind of as someone who knew Jesse Hill in the 70s and the 80s and early 90s, when he was running Atlanta Life, and it was the largest Black insurance company at a time in 1987 when I first came to Black Enterprise. There were 35 Black-owned insurance companies. It was a separate industry category on our DE 100s list back in the day. Of course, it's not like that now. But talk to me about your background. I mean, you're someone who has a background in private equity and venture capital. You are, in a way, a very new age. Not new age is the wrong word. A 21st century financial company leader that, in a way, could not have existed in the generations previous to you. So talk about your journey to this role, and what that means for where Atlanta Life is going.
No, happy to. And so, first off, I have to concede that I am not a native Atlantan. I'm originally from Chicago, sort of born and raised on the South Side. Um, Sort of through that sort of lived experience, ended up being sort of the benefactor of limited opportunities, which I think is a common situation within communities of color, especially in urban environments. And with that came the pros and cons, right? They're parts of my character and personality and story that are deeply rooted in that experience. But the other side of that is having seen the negative of it and having seen the worst of it. And so at a relatively like young age, started thinking about sort of potential solutions, right? And so that goes from naturally sort of not for profit and sort of charities and philanthropy to for profits, right? And so ultimately came to a sort of view that the best way to start to try to address some of the ills of inner cities and communities of color was through for-profit solutions, and specifically companies that can both do well for the community, but also be profitable, and through profitability be self-sustaining. And so to sort of plan that out or play that out, went to Howard University in DC, majored in finance, with the belief that sort of understanding finance and understanding capital is to understand sort of the blood of sort of capitalism and how sort of business works. And so, continuing sort of that thesis, went to Morgan Stanley and went to investment banking and got to see business and finance at the highest levels. But wanted to use that knowledge, sort of an expertise and investing to build large scale minority and women owned businesses. And with the belief that if you create these companies, they can be employers within the community, they can have philanthropic causes, and be a net good towards addressing this issue of sort of limited opportunity. And so through that, started telling people about this vision. And a number of individuals told me that I need to meet a gentleman named Taurus Richardson, who at the time had started ICV, a Black-owned private equity fund. At the time, he was actually transitioning to start his next fund, which he's currently at, IMB Partners. And we had a conversation. And first, we bonded on both being from Chicago, but more so, we bonded on having a similar view of the world. He called it sort of love of the game. And IMB stands for Investors in Minority Businesses. And it was literally about building large scale minority and women owned businesses, but through a private equity model. And so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is like sort of too good to be true. But it was serendipitous in many respects, and so helped him get that off the ground. If you know sort of much as you do about sort of private equity funds, like the thing about private equity funds is predictable cash flows, right? And so predictable cash flows, sort of more mature, boring businesses. I wanted to sort of go earlier stage and what I call sort of more interesting, sort of nascent ideas. That's actually what took me to venture capital. And so ironically was able to find another gentleman who was the CIO of a venture capital firm at the time. He was a brother, and we sort of talked about sort of worldviews, and again, found alignment. And sort of his view was having a venture fund that focused on sort of double bottom line opportunities. And so that's everything from sort of financial inclusion, to improvements in healthcare, to improvements in education, sort of the things I view as sort of the tripod of wellness. And so was able to do that and sort of get that fund launched. Um, Ultimately, just to sort of fast forward a bit, decided to take both of those business strategies and put them together. So both private equity and venture capital, but found my way to meeting Earvin Magic Johnson and a gentleman, Eric Holloman, who's the CEO of Atlanta Life. And what that did was allow me to continue working on this thesis I believed in, but at a company that had been investing in inner city communities for, at the time, the past sort of 2 decades, and sort of bring it home, give it a bigger platform, and thus have a bigger impact. And that's sort of the genesis of where this story began. And so the second deal that came up while I was there was a life insurance company called Equitrust. So back in 2013, we acquired a life insurance company called Equitrust. At the time, it had $14 billion in assets, and now has upwards of 26. And that's where my education began in earnest about insurance. And insurance has a complicated history. My view is that at the very basis or the very baseline, it's a neutral tool. But I actually think if utilized properly and appropriately, it becomes a social good. And so that education began, and sort of Equitrust focused on retirement products, and I saw how it ensured that people don't outlive their money, which is a part of the retirement crisis we're in now.
Right.
Um, but started looking at other opportunities. Equitrust was going well. I moved back to Chicago to help run that. And through that research, I actually first discovered the story of Atlanta Life, and which is a disservice, right? Like I've sat through many a Black history class and went to sort of the mecca in terms of education, but I had never heard of Atlanta Life. Um, and as I learned more, I read that blue book that you held up earlier. There's another book called The Herndons. And it was too good to be true. And so as we think
Welcome
about
to
sort
my
of,
world, Ryan. Welcome
yeah,
where I've been living for 36 years.
yeah, it was too good to be true to the point where like I had some skepticism. And you see the pictures of Mr. Herndon riding in the back of a car with Booker T. Washington, and then you see the initial photos of the Niagara movement, and there he and Norris are. And then you see thank you notes from Dr. Martin Luther King at the house or in the office. And so it became a question of, hey, we need to find a way to get involved with this company and sort of empower it, ensure that it has the ability and platform to maximize its impact. Ultimately, the conclusion we came to was that the best way to do that was to give it a new home, um, sort of infuse significant capital into it, infuse significant resources, take all the expertise that we developed the last 10 years while running Equitrust, and pair that with this legacy and incredible track record that the company had, and root our business model in it and carry it forward for another 100 years. And so that's how we find ourselves where we are today, and with the same mission, right? It is to create, preserve, and grow wealth for Black communities and communities of color. And so that is the journey we've been on.
You know, you've said so many things that are very important. First of all, I have a connection to Chicago too. Even though I'm born and raised in New Jersey and spent most of my adult life in New York, Chicago is my favorite city. And since the pandemic, I kind of go back and forth between both places. I think for the context for our audience, it's important to people to know that while many people, and rightfully so, think of Atlanta as the Black business mecca, because for most of the kind of the end of the 20th century into the beginning of the 21st, it has been that. But before that, it was Chicago. All the biggest Black companies were in Chicago. All the biggest Black banks were in Chicago. Yeah, Detroit too, to some degree, because of the auto industry. But Chicago was, and in many cases still is, the original Black business
Absolutely.
mecca. So I think it's informative and enlightening for your background as a Chicagoan.
Hmm.
I have to believe in some way informed the path you took to
Undoubtedly,
yeah.
undoubtedly. So a number
But then
of
discovering that Atlanta had this legacy too that you weren't aware of.
that's exactly right.
The other thing I think is really important, and you said it, and I'm sure it's going to come up more in this conversation, and it certainly comes up in conversation when people talk about Black enterprise now that we're in our 53rd year, is I tell people that the mission has never changed. It's the method that has to change. It's how we do what we do that has to evolve as major, in this case, Black iconic companies and brands go beyond maybe first or second generation. There are people who are still looking for Black Enterprise magazines printed on newsstands. I said, that's just not anymore the vinyl records. This is not the business anymore. Talk to me about how the mission of Atlanta Life and the legacy that you're building on is the same, but how insurance works today and what was expected of insurance companies today, especially for the Black community, was very different because Atlanta Life was pretty much about life insurance.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, for many generations, including my mom's generation, life insurance is really about preparing for death. It
Hmm.
wasn't about leveraging these tools for health and education
Hmm.
and wealth creation and wealth preservation. And to be an insurance company today, Black owned or not, that's
Hmm.
the business you're in, even if the mission
Hmm.
hasn't changed. So, talk to me from your perspective and your experience of why that's such an important thing to understand as you take Atlanta Life forward.
Happy to do so. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the impact that Black Enterprise had on my life. And so
Oh,
And sort of the beginning of this conversation, how I talked about sort of thinking through solutions that could start to address the ills of inner city communities. Um, the way I ultimately got to the conclusion was twofold, right? It was Black Enterprise. My parents got me a subscription, and so I would constantly sort of read through it, the businesses that existed, the executives, corporate leaders, etc. And so, like, I think a key thing in life is exposure, right? And Black Enterprise provided me that exposure. And now that I think about it, really should get significant credit for sort of everything that I've been able to accomplish thus far. And so thank you to you, thank you to the Grays, thank you to Black Enterprise for that. To your question about sort of life insurance or running an insurance company in today's sort of environment, the thing I love about life insurance is that you are actually um, aligned with your consumers and your policyholders, right? Like the best possible outcome for all of us is if you live as long as possible. And sort of as I think about life insurance, as I think about Atlanta Life, as I think about the Herndon Foundation continuing to be an equity owner in the company, it is all about sort of increasing longevity. It's about increasing quality of life. But the friction still exists, right? And so any conversation about life insurance is inevitably rooted in sort of end of life, or at least having to think about it. And if you were to look at the statistics of sort of the coverage gap and sort of the number of people without life insurance, I think that is because that is a wildly difficult thing to think about. And also, it is a benefit um, that is most significant to your survivors after you're no longer here. Um, and so I think about that in two ways, right? As one, yes, it requires some degree of selflessness and responsibility, but it's also rooted in let's have conversations about financial literacy. Let's understand sort of wealth disparities. Let's understand, a big sort of movement and hashtag recently has been about sort of generational wealth and sort of building Black wealth. And life insurance is one of the methods or ways to do that. Like you can essentially leave a tax-free, significant endowment to your family after your demise. You essentially create an estate, but it is literally focusing on the things that happen while you're here. And so it is ensuring that tripod of wellness exists. So let's talk about fitness. Let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about sort of affordable and safe housing. Let's talk about sort of the appropriate sort of financial products that meet you where you are in your life and actually sort of take you through your arc to allow you to accomplish your goals. Is how I think about it. And another way I think about it is the business model that the company currently has and had sort of prior to the acquisition, and that's group benefits. And so if we segment insurance, you think about things on the property and casualty side, so car insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, etc. Those are what they call compulsory. Like you have to have those things, and thus the friction is removed, and also you ostensibly get sort of perceived living benefit. But if you think about sort of employee sponsored benefits and getting life insurance through your job, that is the closest thing we can get to something becoming compulsory, right? Because it becomes your default position. It's like, hey, if this is offered, you should take it. And yes, there are sort of arguments about it being insufficient, but it is something and it is incremental to all the other things you can do. And so it's having a transparent conversation about sort of life insurance. And then as we get into some of the more complex policies, there's significant sort of living benefits from like cash accumulation and the ability to take loans, etc. But there are a number of conversations to be had, and also as we think about the future, to the point I made about sort of going with people through the arc of their lives, it is doing significant research and dedicating significant time to understanding what those products are to meet people at those sort of various points in life and those specific needs, and building a product portfolio that addresses those things. And so that is also a significant aim of sort of how we think about things.
As someone who has covered, been blessed to cover the evolution of Black business because I've been at Black Enterprise so long, and I've seen multiple generations, whether it's Atlanta Life or other companies and industries. Since my beginning at BE, I came to BE in 1987, so it's
Hmm.
hard for me to remember. Can't believe it's been that long, but I've had the privilege of seeing this evolution. And one of the things that is very gratifying now that our late founder Earl Gray's always predicted would happen was that there would be a generation, and I would suggest that you're probably a second or third generation that would kind of inherit the inherent business acumen that Black people have always had, because we've always
Hmm.
had to do more with less, with less protection, with less legal support, with less
Hmm.
political support. So there's that inherent. Listen, we got to figure out a way to make a dollar out of 15
Hmm.
cents because that's what
Enterprise and spirit.
exactly. But also, Black people started making inroads into corporate America. You see, I have my cover story with Reg Lewis on the
Hmm.
cover as an example of this generation that made inroads into corporate law, into private equity, into corporate America, into the middle and the senior ranks. And obviously that comes with education, like you said, exposure, relationships that previous generations couldn't necessarily establish. And then what you're seeing, I think people like you, my boss Butch Graves is a beneficiary of that, as someone who's going to Harvard B School, and this critical mass of mission orientation that's inherited from people like Earl Graves and Alonzo Herndon and H.J. Russell and others, but finally access to the education, resources, systems understanding
Hmm.
necessary to help Black-owned businesses evolve and scale, whether they're new businesses or existing businesses that have to be reinvented. And so we're very excited about that. People like me, Derek Dingle, the current chief content officer, who's been at Black Enterprise for a very long time, because we've been able to witness that evolution and the, if you will, the payoff of the fight to get better education, better access to education, the fight to get more Black people into corporate America, because it's not just about the careers inside the company, but about the expertise that can be used to
Absolutely.
grow and impact, Black people in general and Black businesses in particular. With that, all that in mind, um, I'd like you to weigh in on what it means to have a generation of people like Magic Johnson,
Hmm.
who obviously we've covered his journey as an entrepreneur over the years. He was a mentee of Earl Gray's when they
Hmm.
bought the Pepsi Cola bottling
Yeah.
franchise in South Africa, and now everybody knows Magic was very deliberate during his playing days about connecting with and learning with business people. And I think I saw something on Instagram yesterday that Magic deliberately targeted people who had floor
Yeah.
seats at games to say, "How
Exactly right.
in here?" But now you do have people like Magic who are not only wealthy enough to enjoy great lives, but are now leveraging their wealth and the business knowledge to be of impact as an investor in
Hmm.
businesses like this. And I just think it's significant. I'd like you to weigh in on what is it like to be able to engage with a Magic Johnson and have that kind of support.
It's incredible. Sort of to the point of exposure. Like there are various degrees of exposure, and this is one that's like less common, even though it's sort of made up for through like press and interviews and YouTube, etc. Um, but it's one thing to have an idea, right? And so I had this idea that you can sort of take business and make it a tool for social good and start to sort of create more opportunities in inner cities. And it's, sort of the old adage that's often stated, if you want to sort of go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But all that to say, he retired in 92, pretty much sort of instantly fully committed to his business career, and it was recognizing an opportunity similar to Mr. Herndon. In fact, it was a void in the services and goods being provided to his community, and that was because the Black community was being discounted for lower per capita income, but people failed to account for sort of higher density and also just the nature sort of being underserved and understanding sort of the desire there to both sort of build profitable businesses, employ people, and provide things to people that they need. And so he was a tangible example of that. And frankly, he's been a tangible example of um, breaking rules in many respects, right? From his basketball career and the idea of being a 6'9" point guard uh, to the licensing deal that he negotiated with David Stern while he was playing, whereby the players weren't sort of receiving the appropriate amount of sort of licensing royalties. And he got a licensing agreement and created his t-shirt company. There's always a joke about when the Bulls beat the Lakers in the 91 finals, him saying that he was going to make a lot of money off Michael's shirt. Uh, and then even with his partnership with Mr. Graves and sort of the Pepsi distributorship,
Right.
all things that sort of set the example and also sort of built, I suspect, his belief and his confidence that his sort of hypothesis was right. And that went from sort of the Burger Kings and fast food restaurants to the movie theaters. And that ultimately paved the way to real estate funds and Starbucks deals, etc., which then paved the way to his next iteration of sort of companies, which now includes insurance. And sort of the scale keeps increasing. And even as the scale increases, he continues to understand that to whom much is given, much is required, and is intentional about giving back. And so it was a real life sort of data point that what I believe was possible. It was a willingness to sort of bring me into the fold and sort of carry his mission forward. And now it's this opportunity to take what I call the coalescing of myriad things. And so that's everything from sort of this initial view I had to a passion to this company that was created in 1905 that was living all the principles that I believed in before they had titles and papers and things about them. Um, and so it's provided this incredible opportunity for us to do great work for our community. And the company, like it's the acquisition closed in January. The company is currently larger than it's ever been, but this is nothing compared to where it's going to go. And so um, all of that has sort of been facilitated by the things he's accomplished in his life. And so, and he just got his kudos from Forbes.
Yeah.
And so, and I told him that, wow, that accolade may not necessarily mean that much to him, at least the sort of acknowledgement of it. I said the acknowledgement of it is important because it shows what's possible. And if you think back to trying to get those sort of initial businesses off the ground and people taking meetings, but not believing and not investing and you putting up your own capital, like this is the other side of that.
Oh yeah.
And so, um, even though you were so famous and so accomplished in your sport, you still had these difficulties that many entrepreneurs and especially minority entrepreneurs face. And this shows what deferred or delayed gratification looks like and the heights that can be achieved.
Well, we could do a whole nother show on, and I've had conversations with Magic, conversations with Drew Pearson. I've interviewed so many former professional athletes who went on to succeed, because there's a whole legacy of that as well, going back to Jackie Robinson and others, um, about how being this star athlete got you in the door, but didn't always get you taken seriously once you were on the other side of the door. Oh, can I get an autograph? And you said, but I'm here to talk business. Oh, no, I'm not here for that. But can you take a picture of me that I give to my son? That kind of thing.
100%, yeah.
And Magic ran that gauntlet just like a lot of athletes have.
Mhm.
But Magic has made it easier for the athletes that have followed, who are now very much forward thinking around what does business opportunities look like once my playing days are over, even while I'm still playing. And now we got the age of the NIL deal and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. But that could be a whole nother show. And let me say, for the sake of journalistic correctness, I made reference to Magic Johnson and Mr. Graves. That was for the DC Pepsi distributorship, not the South Africa business. So let me just make that clear.
Yeah. Okay,
But I do want to fast forward for the rest of this conversation to what you just said about where you're going. You're big now, but there's where you're going to be and what your objectives are, both
Mhm.
business and otherwise. And I've this saying, it's common in sports, but it's true in everything. People will invest in your potential and get excited about your potential,
Mhm.
but sooner or later, it's about performance.
Exactly.
And you're not in it for just for the fun of it. Magic is not doing business just to have, oh, I'm doing a good thing. The chief responsibility of I tell people, a black-owned business is to
Mhm.
be a profitable, effective business, because when that happens, you can accomplish all the social and economic impacts that you want to have.
Mhm.
Talk to me about what the expectation is, what the goals are, going forward. What is expected of you as the EVP? What is expected of new leadership? What does Magic expect as an investor? And what generally can we all expect um, for you to accomplish as Atlanta life moves into its next generation?
Mhm. Yeah, so it is multifaceted. And so, like I said earlier, it is honoring the Herndon legacy and how this company has historically been run. And that is, again, creating, growing, and preserving wealth for Black people and communities of color. As I think about sort of the business model currently, it is twofold, right? Like one is a primarily sort of institutional client, but with a end consumer that is individuals, and then the other is a retail business that we plan to build out and relaunch. And so as I think about sort of the institutional business, it's group benefits, right? And it was said in that video you saw at the reception, is that a number of companies and employees, employers, etc., have wanted their benefits providers to reflect the demographics of their company. And for too long, it has been believed that that was not possible, but that is not the case, and we're here to prove it. And so it is to really ramp the group benefits business, specifically providing life insurance to a number of employers with the ultimate goal of getting it to their employees. But with the belief that we talked about earlier, it is the closest way to make it compulsory and getting it into the hands of as many people as possible, with the belief that it is a social good and a net good. And it ensures at the very least that loved ones can be buried with dignity, and that sort of outstanding expenses can be taken care of, and there can be some funds within the family to sort of move forward in some regard. But it is also expanding those offerings with the same belief, right? Like the best way to get protection in the hands of individuals is often through their employers. But then it is thinking about Atlanta Life as, yes, an insurance company, but I would call it something more broad than that. And it is a financial services company and a vehicle for empowerment. And that gets back to the retail business. And so we're doing sort of significant work in strategizing about understanding the needs of the Black community at different points in their lives. And they're just literally different answers for every individual. And then using that as a way to come up with products that are appropriate, that actually solve. So it's back solving instead of sort of pushing something to the market. It is, let's understand the needs, let's understand the issues, and let's create these products that address these different things, or and that almost has like a negative connotation that helps people achieve the goals that they desire. And so that will be a significant part of the business, but the group benefits business by itself is significant. And then there's like this nuance issue too, where a number of like corporations, and I would even broaden it out to just employers generally, have supplier diversity spend goals, and often set goals and then often don't meet them. And so we're here to, one, provide a path to that, but also help advise on sort of how to meet those goals, and how to have more procurement from diverse suppliers and educate the world that this thing exists. And actually, I was watching the interview you did with the chief procurement officer at Manulife,
Yes.
and he was talking about sort of the spend they do, and you had a in-depth conversation about supplier diversity, and how it can be a tool for wealth for minority communities, and it is sort of playing that thesis out and bringing people along for that journey. And if you think about sort of Atlanta, if you think about DC, places where there's significant populations of Black affluence, many a times it came through government contracts and supply diversity spend. And that made a world of difference in terms of upliftment and empowerment. And so it is continuing to grow that pie and be a player within that.
You know, you made some really insightful and important points. But one of the things that you said, in addition to interviewing obviously Black-owned companies, I spend a lot of my time, or everybody at Black Enterprise does, interviewing people of influence, Black and otherwise, in quote unquote mainstream companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've talked to a lot of people in your space, and you hit on a couple of things I think is very important. That I would say that Atlanta Life, North Carolina Mutual out of Durham, Golden
Mm-hmm.
State Mutual out of Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles, Universal Life out of Memphis. I mean, again, it was once 35 companies that was
Mm-hmm.
in space back in the day. But those were like the big four that really was leading the way. But they were struggling with the barriers of expanding their offerings. One,
Mm-hmm.
because it does require capital.
It
Uh,
does.
it requires a significant amount of capital. So people are, why can't you do it? And they're like, it's not. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's a chicken and egg. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But the flip side of that is that the transition that Atlanta Life is now making is the transition that all insurance companies had to make, which is one, we're financial services companies that can and should offer a wide range of services to the consumer population and institutional and private businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance is a product when once upon a time that was considered a whole industry, and now it's a
Mm-hmm.
product and offered within an industry. And it took time not only for the industry to evolve to that point, and you'll look at other mainstream, well-known brands who once upon a time called themselves blank insurance, and now they call themselves blank
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, we don't want to be thought of as only an insurance company because we are now fully serving financial services company. So it took the industry time to evolve to that point, but it also took us consumers time to evolve to know that blank is not just an insurance company, it's a financial
Mm-hmm.
services company. And I just think it's significant that this new resurgence, if you will, of Atlanta Life is squarely positioned in a way that makes sense given the way financial services is marketed in general, not just nationally but globally, and that you have a Black-owned company with this legacy that still understands that's what it takes to really compete and move forward going forward. And again, this is something that maybe wasn't possible for the previous generations of leadership in these companies for a wide variety of reasons.
No, that's exactly right. And even beyond financial services, right? Like a lot of it to some degree is wellness. Like I've heard you say
Mhm.
you have a target age of 104. It's
Yeah.
being a company that can do certain things that can help you along in that journey. And
Yes.
so, yeah.
Yes. Well, again, we're talking about everything from health equity to
Mm-hmm.
sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
things that people didn't think of as insurance related or even financial services
Yeah.
related.
It's all systemic and all flows
Exactly.
together in a good or a bad way.
What are you most excited about as we continue to be forward looking and forward thinking about your role, this journey? I mean, it just seems like just a very fun opportunity. It's
Mm-hmm.
work. I'm sure
It is a lot of work.
it is work. But what are you most excited about as? And I got to say again, us journalists can be very jaded. I've been doing this a long time. Social media has taken hype to all new levels. Again, the reason why I decided I wanted to start doing this show to get again beyond the hype.
Perfectly named.
But I have to say the energy at your reception in Atlanta last month was legit, and it wasn't just legit because there were celebrities in the house, like
Mm-hmm.
who was there, Ludacris, and I don't want to start dropping names, but both Atlanta can have a reputation of, I say it's the capital of front, and just
Mm-hmm.
capital of kind of popping your collar and showing out in a way that often is like, okay, slow down. But in this case,
Mm-hmm.
it was a mix of those types of people, but legitimate business leaders, moguls, the mayor. It really was. one of those events that I think one day will be seen as a historic event. And again, we're living in an age where everybody says every event is a historic event.
Mm-hmm.
But that energy was there, and I sense that energy in you now in this conversation. What does it feel like for you as you do your day-to-day work, where every day isn't going to be an interview with Black Enterprise, every day isn't going to be a big reception with Magic Johnson. There's the work that's going to get done on a day-to-day basis when
Mm-hmm.
nobody's watching and nobody cares but you and your team, and you win the games, in these
Mm-hmm.
quiet moments, not at the big celebration when you reach a milestone. So talk to me about what that's like for you.
It's the way I think about it, right? It's passion and purpose.
Right.
And so we've talked about sort of the desired aims of the company, both whether it be sort of financially, but more so from an impact perspective. And as we think about sort of protection and risk management and prosperity and closing the wealth gap, like the way I think about that event is, what does that feel like? Like, if your risks are managed, if you are prosperous, if you are safe, like, what is the actual sort of physical manifestation of that? And I think we were able to capture it in that room, right? It's joy. Like, it is a celebration, both of a legacy, both of accomplishment, of Black business, and of a bright future.
Yes.
Um, and like I told you at the beginning of this interview, like, this is something that I've been committed to literally since I was a child. And it was rooting a number of things, from like understanding how my household situation made a difference in a positive way, to being the only one of my friends in a two-parent household, and even with that, sort of not being able to avoid seeing violence, that hit very, very close to home at the age of 8. And frankly, again, when I lost my nephew and last year. And so I'm constantly reminded of the issues that exist. I understand the depths of sort of despair and tragedy that those issues can create, but I also understand the opportunity and see that light at the end of the tunnel. And so I'm just trying to do my part and carrying that's as close to that light as I can. And so that is what motivates me. That's what I try and motivate the staff with. And there's some quote about sort of, I don't know if it's attributed to like Mark Twain or something, about sort of, if you find what you love, there's no such thing as work. And granted, there are very long and tiring days and moments of disappointment. Um, but the opportunity, the chance to sort of accomplish that goal, and have more days feel like what that reception felt like. And even I'll rewind before the reception. So the reception was on Monday. On Saturday, we did this community event with 120 Atlanta youth and their parents, where we taught, we actually, I believe, granted I'm biased, but we struck the balance of education and fun. So teaching entrepreneurship, teaching financial literacy. We even painted a mural. We had a marching band come through. We had Ti come through and do fireside chat, and understanding that this journey begins when you're that young, right? You need the appropriate sort of academic foundation. You need to feel safe. You need to be fed. And then you need to be given exposure. You need to be given opportunity. And I view this all as like a conveyor belt towards positivity.
Yes.
And the opportunity to sort of build that is what motivates me on a daily basis.
Yeah, again, we live in the same life. I'm much older than you are, but I came from, my audience knows I was raised in a working poor household in a working class community. My environment wasn't as tough as, say, Southside Chicago,
Mhm.
but it wasn't. My mother and my family really couldn't imagine the life that I was going to live, because it went so far beyond even what I could have imagined or what seemed possible for us.
Mhm.
So, you talk about two things about purpose. And I tell people, when you find that job, that career, that thing that you do, that you wake up and it's going to be a bad day,
Mhm.
but you still want it. You still
Yeah.
want to go. You're like, I know it's going to be horrible based on what happened yesterday. I know
Mhm.
it's going to be tough, but I can't wait to get there. And that's what I mean. Yeah, the work is hard. It's still work.
Hmm.
But so many people are working hard for things that they don't care about or things that don't mean anything to them. And we get to work hard at things that even on a bad day, we still want to do it. The other thing that was something that I experienced in my, first few years at Black Enterprise, again, because of the legacy of Earl Graves, is when you wake up and you realize not only is there a light at the end of the tunnel, but for somebody out there, you're the light at the end of the tunnel. Them seeing you, just like you saw something or somebody or met somebody, you are their light at the end of the tunnel. For those kids on that Saturday, you are the light at the end of the tunnel that says, "Oh, things are possible that I didn't think were possible, and people care that I didn't think cared." And so as we kind of wind down our conversation, talk to me about, there's somebody watching this interview, or maybe they're in high school, maybe they're in college, maybe they're a recent graduate, who because of this says, "Oh, I saw this dude Ryan Smith, and now my horizons for what I think I might want to accomplish." I mean, it's what the business that Black Enterprise is ultimately in. I mean, I don't have to tell you, I've been there long enough. You're not the first person to tell me, "Oh, I read this, I saw this, I met this through Black Enterprise, and that's what made me decide to do this thing that I'm doing today, or it got me on the path." What is it that you hope, as younger people who may come from the same background that you came from,
Hmm.
who, like you said, it's not yesterday, it's today, it's real.
Hmm.
Um, Take from your story, your example, the story of Atlanta Life that says, "Yeah, I might have lost somebody to violence yesterday. Yeah, maybe I'm not coming out of the best school system in the world. Yeah, maybe the expectations in my family are not very high, but I still want to move forward and excel and succeed beyond anything maybe I can see around me right now."
So I would be remiss if I didn't first cite Mr. Herndon's story, right? Like
Mm,
born into slavery, like
yes.
literally born into slavery, then emancipated, which is great, but emancipated with nothing, right? So no opportunity, no food, no money, had to peddle whatever he could find to try and provide some income for his family, and then um, to live through race riots, to find a trade, which was barbering, and show up to Atlanta with $11 in his pocket, and one go on to born into slavery to owning more than 100 properties, donating a significant amount of land to sort of the Atlanta University Center, and then going on to found this life insurance company, which became one of the most successful and prominent Black-owned companies of that century. Like, if all of that is surmountable,
Right, right,
then
right, right.
yeah, then it's going to be hard for you to sort of find excuses about why whatever you want to do is not possible, even though it may feel that way in that moment. But it's just my advice is believe, right?
Right.
Educate yourself, learn about as much as you can, um, and have belief in what you're doing. And even if there are setbacks, understand that you are young, right? And you have space and opportunity to make some mistakes and just adapt and adjust. And so you might think this is the way to do it. That wasn't necessarily the answer, but what was the learning and what direction does that take you? And sort of keep iterating on that. Um, Try to sort of identify people that you think are doing interesting things or who sort of hold themselves in a regard that you admire, and try and meet them, try and have conversations. And then you have a tool that I didn't have, you didn't have, right? And so that is social media, which makes literally everyone a degree of separation away. And granted, like, you can pick a random celebrity or a random business leader or a random executive or a random executive director or teacher, and reach out to them. The worst that can happen is like they not respond, right? But if you sort of do that enough and you provide context of, hey, this is what I know about you, this is why I'm reaching out to you, this is what I'm interested in, you're increasing your likelihood of a response and ultimately success. And those are like the small moments that can literally like change your life in a positive way. And my life story has been countless examples of that, and sort of having favor when I don't think I deserve it. Like I never thought I was like the smartest person in school, but my mother instilled a love for reading, and still to this day I try and get through at least 40 books a year.
Yep.
It's becoming a little bit of challenge
Yeah.
because I have a, a,
Very
a
time
newborn
consuming
daughter
job.
and trying to build this company.
Right.
But from my siblings to certain teachers to an incredible mentor when I got to Howard and Morgan Stanley, Carla Harris, to telling people what I wanted to do and them saying, hey, you should meet Taurus, let me introduce you, to Stephen DeBerry, to Eric Holloman and Magic Johnson. Like it's been a journey of being intentional and to some degree being all in. Like after Morgan Stanley, my view was I'm going to find a way to align my passion with my skill set to drive this outcome. And there were moments where I felt like I may have made the wrong turn and just held on a little bit longer. And then something incredible or positive happened. And life will be a series of that moments and a series of setbacks. And sort of the ultimate thing is perseverance, belief, and commitment. And like we talked about, hard work.
Well, I'm gonna just hit on a couple of things as we wind down. I'm just, for that reason, I am again, and again, you guys should get, well, whatever version you can get. You should read the story of Alonzo Herndon, but I'm a big believer of reading business biographies and business
Hmm.
biographies of Black people in particular,
Hmm.
because not only it's like free role modeling, it's a free success guide,
Hmm.
but also you learn that it wasn't a straight line for them either. And you saw how they had to persevere and overcome with disappointments and setbacks and personal growth issues that they had to learn to manage. And you start to realize that, like you said, if they could do it, especially
Hmm.
under those circumstances, you
Yeah,
really can do it and you can learn from their example. Um, the second thing is why it may not be always easy to find the mentors you want, but role models are free. You don't
hmm,
need to know a person to learn from them.
hmm,
And to your point about social media, when people say they don't get, I'm big into social media, so
hmm,
you know that. I probably my kids probably think I spend too much time on it. But my thing is, it's free advice. It's free role models. You want to
hmm.
know what makes Magic Johnson Magic Johnson? There's so much stuff out there about successful people and what their stories and their experiences that you literally can create your own board of advisors, which I have
Yeah,
on Instagram and LinkedIn in particular. That I don't know them, they don't know me, but I'm just paying attention to what they share and what they say, so I can be better. And
exactly right.
to all of my mentees, you have access to people and their methods in a way that, and again, I'm older than you are, but our parents, what? They were never going to cross paths in any way with the wealthiest and most successful in their communities and their generations. And even if they did, it was not going to be any ongoing interaction. So I amen everything that you're saying about the opportunities that we have before us, even as we face significant obstacles. Last thing, I always, I'm very passionate about self care and
Hmm.
investing in our biggest asset, which is us, because if we break down, everything breaks down.
Yeah.
Um, talk to me about, and you already talked about you got a demanding job.
Hmm.
Um, I believe you're a newlywed. You're about to be. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
yep.
Fiance wedding in 2024, and then have my baby girl too. So
Okay, so there's that. Trust me, that's going to be a whole nother
yeah.
demand on your time and attention. Talk to me about how Ryan takes care of Ryan, how you pour into yourself, keep yourself going, so that you can perform at your best in all these other roles.
So it's funny. It's actually this question is perfectly timed, and so throughout my life, it's been fitness, right? Like I've been adamant about sort of working out probably 5 to 6 times a week. And so that spanned everything from boxing to cycling to weightlifting. But haven't been that great at it over the past year. And it's for all the reasons you mentioned and a significant amount of travel and also relocating. And so that takes you out of your habits and things of that sort, but have finally sort of drew the line in the sand and sort of got back to working out 4 to 5 times a week, cleaned up my eating, and it's rooted in a number of things, right? It is I'm at my best when I'm healthy and working out, both from an energy perspective, nutritional perspective, and fitness perspective. Um, but also like all the things I've talked about, right? So longevity and living a healthy lifestyle. Like I believe in these things, and I need to, be eating or consuming my own medicine. And so I had to get back to it. And then I think about sort of my daughter, and she's obviously very young now, and God willing, has a very long life ahead of her. And I want to be there, and I want to teach her a number of like physical skills from sports and things, self-defense, swimming, etc. Uh, and so you gotta stay strong, you gotta stay agile, you gotta stay flexible, and so and you gotta be around. And so for all those reasons, and also sort of travel, being brutal for a while, but now starting to settle down, have got back to sort of my old habits, and working out is my thing, and spending time with friends, spending time with family, spending time with my fiance,
Yeah.
all those things I find restorative and am intentional about doing. And granted, to the sacrifice of other things I may have filled my time with historically, but it's about prioritization.
Yeah, well, I always tell people the reason I get to do everything I want to do is because I've learned to say no to everything I could do that's not bad, but not really what I want to do. And
Absolutely.
that prioritization is important. The other thing, I say if you find your what, if you find your why, you will find your way. And
Hmm.
my original fitness goal, and those who know me or follow me on social media, I'm very passionate about bodybuilding and fitness
Hmm.
as not just a cosmetic lifestyle choice, but a health and wealth choice, a true economic choice. Is that my original first goal was when my son was born, he's now 31. I wanted to be healthy enough to play basketball with him in the driveway someday.
Absolutely.
And up to that point, my health habits were not the greatest in the world. And I was like, but I don't want to just watch him from the porch. I want to be around, as you said. No, I
Yeah.
want to be able to say, let's go play. And I
Yeah.
want to be able to play and realize that and more. And I have a grandson that I hope to be able to play basketball with in the driveway
So,
someday. But I tell people you got to tie those goals or your motivation to goals that mean something to you,
mhm.
and you'll be surprised how that priority will rise to the top, even when other things temporarily take command of your time and your schedule. Listen,
No,
Ryan, I
I
knew
agree completely. And I've heard you talk about sort of your weight training and bodybuilding and your enjoyment of it. And sort of, I've never been one who works out because I have to, right? Like it is enjoyable. When it happens, it makes my day better,
yes,
and better for all. And so,
right, exactly. My kids are
and
like, "When's the last
so,
time you went to the gym?
yeah,
Because
exactly,
what's up with you, dude?"
exactly. It's like you need to go work out, go have fun.
Yeah, but
And
it's
so,
real, and also your cognitive ability. I'm sharper
yeah,
when I
absolutely.
when I'm like well fed, working
Hmm.
out, getting the right amount of sleep. I'm actually more effective, which obviously
Hmm.
feeds into my effectiveness in my work and other areas of my life. So again,
No,
we can go
100%
on
agree.
forever, man. We can go on forever. Listen,
Hmm.
Ryan, what's the best way if people want to kind of keep up with the Atlanta Life story, keep up with your
Hmm.
story, whether it's on social websites, whatever? What's the best way for people to kind of,
Yep.
you know,
So all the standard ways. So LinkedIn, both the company as well as myself are on there.
Mhm.
Social media. Atlanta Life is the handle on Instagram. Atlanta Life will soon be the handle on Twitter. Uh, right now it is Atlanta Life INS.
Right.
And also there's a Facebook page, and then we have our website, atlantalife.com. And so a lot is scheduled to happen soon. And so we obviously had sort of the official launch last month, but a lot of great things to come, especially as we get into January with MLK Day and Black History Month. And just the general plans for the company and how we plan to actualize this vision. So,
Listen, man, I deeply appreciate you joining me for Beyond the Hype. I appreciate everything that you're doing, both as an individual and obviously the company, and your team. Obviously, Black Enterprise is going to be keenly interested in watching the Atlanta life story as it continues to evolve. Just thank you for being my guest on Beyond the Hype. I really deeply
No,
believe you.
no, thank you for having me. And the respect for your work is profound. And so I've been watching your journey for a very long time. So it's the pleasure to do this.
See, that's why I got to act right, because people tell me that. My mother used to say, "You better keep your act right on, because you don't know who's paying attention to
Hey,
you."
man, you're doing a great job at it. So,
I appreciate it, Ryan.
of
Listen,
course.
everybody, as I promised, another great edition of Beyond the Hype. I know you want to stay on top of the Atlanta life story. It's a story worth watching and listening to for a whole range of reasons. Again, I would urge you, if you can get a copy of Guardian of Black Economic Dignity, Atlanta Life Insurance Company, I would urge you to do so. And again, I'm a big believer in reading about the journeys of other people to help you inform your own journey. Again, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP, Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. This has been another edition of Beyond the Hype. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.